Chapter 4. Priorities. Tanrag, Alderman Bartnet called. He beckoned Race over. Come here. Ideally, Race would have preferred to ignore the Alderman altogether. He couldn't resist turning his head for just a moment to look at the gathered officers. Even then, he considered walking out the main gates of the castle without responding. He was certain that whatever it was the Alderman wanted, it wasn't going to be as important to Race as finding Gagara. Race's resistance to the order didn't last long. It was a simple equation of self-preservation. If Alderman Bartnet should begin to suspect that Race wasn't a totally loyal member of the invading army, he could make things very awkward for Race. That was a very impressive display, Alderman Bartnet said as Race reached the officers. The way you took down 4 of your own race within a matter of seconds. Thank you, sir, Race replied. He looked in turn at each of the officers gathered there. The Minotaur and Elf of Rave's raiders stood slightly to one side, while Dragonman Finert and Wormman Frayne seemed to be just 2 among quite a number of regular army officers, including many wearing the rank of Drakeman, some of whom he recognised as having been officers in the Hope. How long have you been able to use a sword? Alderman Bartnet asked. I only comment because I've never heard of a harpy using a sword before. It was at hand, Race replied, shrugging his shoulders. I was given a few rudimentary lessons back when I was a prisoner of the humans. They wanted me to be more of a challenge than an average harpy. But no real training, the Alderman asked. I'll admit, I'd rather use a sword than rely on my own claws, sir, Race commented. But then, they wouldn't let me use my claws in those practice matches. No doubt, they were worried you might seriously hurt someone, the Alderman commented. Though, I expect you could do some serious damage with a practice sword, if you put your mind to it. I could, sir, Race agreed. Seriously, though, few elves seem to have as much flair for the sword as you seem to have. For a harpy with so little training, you must be a natural. Thank you, Race said. He glanced nervously over his shoulder towards the main castle gates. Dragonman Gress, the Alderman commented, patting the Minotaur officer gently on his shoulder, was also impressed with your little skirmish. He has a proposal for you if you're willing to listen. The Minotaur Dragonman, dressed in the black uniform of Rave's raiders, stepped forward and bowed just ever so slightly. Drakeman Tanrag, both I and my fellow officers were very impressed with the way you handled yourself in combat just now. Indeed we were, Dragonman Finert offered. It was strange to hear such words from Finert. You killed 4 harpies within a matter of seconds without even batting an eyelid. I think I could actually grow to like you. It's just a shame you weren't born an elf. An elf, Wormman Frayne added for emphasis. Please, Alderman Bartnet stated, let the Minotaur pitch his case. Minotaur, pah, Dragonman Finert muttered. Pah, Wormman Frayne agreed. Tanrag, Dragonman Gress continued, if you want, I can find you a post in Rave's Raiders. I can bring you straight in at the rank of Chargeman. Chargeman? Race replied doubtfully. Actually, the position sounded good to Race. The Raiders has always been a better proposition than the Hope. And since his true loyalties lay well outside the Elven army, the rank they gave him wasn't really all that important. Then again, he didn't want to sound too eager, and there were other aspects to consider. I can bring you straight in at the rank of Chargeman immediately, the Minotaur said. Normally I like to promote new recruits rather than demote them, so I'll put in a request for you to be given the rank of Wormman as soon as possible. You will find that in the Raiders there is virtually no limit on how high you can climb. The only rank that is considered to be outside our scope is that of Emperor's Man. However, any rank higher than Chargeman has to be officially sanctioned by our leader. I don't foresee any problem with you making Wormman, but it could take a week or 2 before it's made official. Your leader, would that be Rave? Race asked. The Minotaur shook his head and smiled. Galiath Rave founded Rave's Raiders, true, but he died well over 2 centuries ago. We just keep his name to honour him. The current leader is an elf by the name of Hendo Madurt. He's actually an ex-arena champion. So, what do you think? I'm tempted, Race admitted. Very tempted. If I did join, where would I be stationed? I mean, where are the rest of the regiment at the moment? Also, I joined the Hope in the first place in order to be close to my girlfriend. Is she also being given the option of joining the Raiders? The Minotaur looked down at his feet for a second. Then he looked back at Race. Where is your girlfriend? I don't know, Race admitted. I lost sight of her after the battle. I assume she was a harpy fighting with the Hope like you. I somehow don't see you having a romance with a harpy from a village. Unless you were part of that village. In which case I wouldn't be in the Hope, Race finished for him. Exactly, the Minotaur said. Race nodded. She was. The Minotaur looked Race in the eyes and spoke in a way that almost sounded as if he was commiserating. You do realise she's probably dead by now. The Minotaur stepped around Race and pointed towards the battlements where the main body of fighting had taken place. She's either lying on top of that wall or outside in the field beyond it. I didn't think any of the Harpies and the Hope survived that battle. It's a miracle that you survived. I'm sure there must be others, Race countered. He followed the Minotaur's finger to the wall in question. I'm not going to believe that Gagara is dead until I see her body. Did any of the Hope survive? I don't see any of them about. I think a fair number did, Gress told him. I can't say for sure, but I think I saw as many as a third of the regiment hanging around near the stables not too long after the battle. To be honest, they seemed rather despondent, although that isn't all that unusual for a regiment that has suffered such great losses. I had noted a few who had put on an excellent show during the battle and was planning to offer them positions in the raiders. A Minotaur, a Goblin, a Satyr, and an Ogre. When I went round to talk to them though, they were no longer there. I can only assume that they've been sent on some task to help them keep their minds off things. They could have been sent on to Lamington to aid the Hope Regiment taking that city, the black-clad elf commented. Could be, the Minotaur agreed. He glanced towards Alderman Bartonet. The Alderman shook his head. Anyway, the Minotaur continued, the 421st Hope effectively doesn't exist anymore. Their officers have moved to new regiments and their soldiers are either dead or transferred. That brings us back to my original offer. Can I add you to our roll call? I'd like to say yes, Race replied. He was still thinking about Gagara. If she had sat in the forest and watched the Hope march out, she might have joined them. It was more than likely she would be loath to enter the castle, just in case she should be accused of desertion. He would have to check the trees first in case she was still there. If she wasn't, he would have to find out where the rest of the regiment had gone, and he would have to follow. As his mind ran through these thoughts, he said in an answer to the Minotaur's question, But I can't unless you're willing to accept my girlfriend into your ranks as well. Assuming she's alive, the Minotaur said. Assuming she's alive, Race agreed. Gress shook his head slowly. I can't make that sort of judgment. I haven't seen her fight. I don't know how capable she is. Then I'm afraid I cannot accept, Race told the Minotaur. I'm sorry. Gagara is the most important thing in my life. I'm not going to leave her just to further my own career. Gress held up his hand. Let's not be too hasty. I can't agree to accept your girlfriend into the ranks of the raiders. However, as a worm man, such a deed would not be beyond you. It wouldn't be the first time someone has brought a loved one into the regiment after them. Although I must warn you, if, Gagara, Race offered, if your Gagara hasn't the strength of will, the skill, or the ability to be a member of our regiment, it would reflect badly on you for having introduced her. You could even be stripped of your rank. Race smiled to himself. Worm Man Race. Gagara had always said he would make Worm Man. It could take 2 weeks before he was made a Worm Man, and could bring Gagara into the regiment, though. He could be posted anywhere during that time, and with Gagara still officially a member of the Hope, there was a good chance she would be dead. I don't know, Race commented. He began to turn. He really should be getting on with that search. Perhaps I'll have a better idea after I find my girlfriend. Fair enough, Gress said. I'll leave the offer open until tonight. Race glanced back over his shoulder. Thank you. He began to head towards the main gate. Race had taken no more than 3 steps when he again heard the voice of the Alderman calling him back. To Race's ear, his voice sounded quite strict. Tanrag, I didn't summon you over here just so you could talk to the Minotaur. I have a task for you. Race turned again and walked back to the Alderman. I apologise, sir. What can I do for you? We have a prisoner. I need you to climb to the top of that tower. Alderman Bartonet pointed across the courtyard to one of the towers. And question him. Race remembered that tower well. It had been more than a year since he had made his daring escape with the help of the rest of his family. He remembered how awkward the steps were to his then new harpy feet, and how narrow the cell at the very top of that tower was. That tower, sir? That tower, the Alderman confirmed. Not all the prisoners we took today were sold to the local slavers. One in particular we decided to keep for questioning. I understand you speak their language. Or was I misinformed? I do speak the language, Race admitted reluctantly. Who is the prisoner? The Alderman grinned. His name is Tyr. He was the little lordling that was in charge of the defence of this castle. If anyone knows why all the villages were empty and where the peasants fled to, it will be him. I'm hoping he'll be able to tell us who the spy is. Someone tipped them off that we were coming, and I want his name. I also want to know where the rest of the garrison that should have been defending this castle went. Tyr, Race thought to himself. Now he had to find Gagara and rescue Tia. For a moment he was torn. Maybe he should rescue Tia while he was here, and then go and look for Gagara. He decided against that action quite quickly. He could bring Gagara back here fairly safely, and use her to aid his rescue of Tia. If he rescued Tia first, things could get quite hairy as he then tried to find Gagara. Race was certain of one thing: as soon as he rescued Tia, his cover would be blown. As Race pondered these thoughts, he said simply, "The garrison was low? You yourself said there should be at least 1,000 in defence. Now, by that, I assumed you meant 1,000 soldiers, not including the peasants. At the very least, I assumed you meant soldiers and knights. There were only about 100 soldiers. Their numbers were bolstered somewhat by the 200 peasants we encountered, but even counting all of them, and the knights as part of the garrison, we're still missing more than half." "They knew we were coming," Dragonman Finert commented for emphasis. "Book of War, Canto 7, line 29. Look then to your own forces, for one among you is a traitor." "A traitor," Wormman Frayne added. "I have to go and find my girlfriend," Race explained. "I have to know whether or not she survived the battle. I don't think it will take too long. Once I know if she's safe, I'll be able to concentrate on questioning your prisoner." "I'll never understand you harpies," the Elderman commented. "I thought the males of your species had more than just one girlfriend. Surely it doesn't really matter whether or not this one even survived the battle." "You're thinking of village harpies," Race explained. "I have strong feelings for my girlfriend. I must know if she survived the battle or not. I'll be of no use to you if I can't concentrate on the questions." "Tanrag," it was Dragonman Finert speaking. "I order you to obey. Go and question the prisoner immediately." "Prisoner immediately," Wormman Frayne echoed. "Book of Oppression, Canto 19, line 42. Never allow your enemy a moment's rest." "Moment's rest," Wormman Frayne offered. "So, get up there. Once you're finished questioning the prisoner, you can take as long as you like finding this whore of yours." "Yours," Wormman Frayne echoed. Race took a step back and took a careful look at Dragonman Finert. He paid particular attention to the blue tunic that the Dragonman was now wearing. Then he said, "Well, it's lucky for me that you're no longer my commanding officer then, isn't it?" "I still outrank you," Dragonman Finert insisted, "and my word is still your command." "Tanrag," Elderman Bartonet interrupted. "I'm in charge of several regiments of the army, including the remnants of the 421st Hope. If I wanted, I could order you up that tower to question the prisoner immediately. If you refuse me, I'll have you up against the wall in front of a line of archers before you know what hit you." "But my girlfriend," Rose tried to protest. "However, I am not without compassion. I understand your feelings for your girlfriend, even if I don't understand how a harpy such as yourself could have such feelings. Anyway, I have a few small tasks of my own to perform before you question the prisoner. Since I want to be present when you do it, this gives us both a little bit of time. I'll meet you back here inside of 1 hour. Do not be late." "Yes, sir," Race replied. "Thank you, sir." He had an hour. That wasn't very long, but it should be plenty of time to walk to the edge of the forest, find Gagara, and return to the castle, so long as she hadn't gone too far. Race left the castle, walking over to where most of the harpies had fallen during the first 2 volleys of arrows. He had known so many of them that in some way it broke his heart to see them all lying here now. Most of them had fallen on their fronts. This made sense, as harpies tended to fly horizontally and only flew on their backs when they wanted to show off. Race knew that Gagara wasn't likely to be among them, yet he couldn't help but check anyway. He recognised the short and stumpy tail of Offlig. He hadn't really known her that well, but he would recognise that tail anywhere. He had spoken to her once when she was operating a roasting spit by the fire pits. Then there was the slight discoloration on the corpse of Tifnir. Race remembered seeing her just before the battle, though he hadn't bothered to go and chat to her. At each body he stopped and checked for signs of life. They were all dead. But Race had to know. He had to be sure that he wasn't the only harpy to have survived the battle. There had to be someone else. Race was vaguely aware that he was attracting the attention of some of the looters. Some of them stopped what they were doing and began to head in his direction. Perhaps it was just a coincidence. They were still checking the corpses for valuables, and if anything, a few looters were actively heading away from Race. Nevertheless, many of the looters did seem to be getting slowly closer and closer to Race's position. The harpies had died in 2 waves that morning before the few survivors had reached the castle. Most of them, Race included, had been struck down in the second volley. Only 3 had fallen in the first volley of arrows. although he remembered that a fourth had been struck in the hand. Surely that fourth harpy had to be alive somewhere. Ray specifically remembered telling her to leave the formation before the second volley had struck them. Race reached the nearest of the three killed in that first volley and began to check her over. There were no signs of life. "Looking for someone in particular, love?" The voice belonged to one of the elven looters. Race had heard the man's approach long before he spoke. He was now standing less than 10 yards away. "Just checking for signs of life," Race replied. He stood up and turned to face the elf. He couldn't stop himself as he tilted his head just slightly to the left. "Oh," the elf commented, waving his hands dismissively. "We already did that. Everyone left on this field is dead. Everyone else, everyone who was wounded, is either sitting in the makeshift infirmary in the castle or was taken back to our campsite where we did whatever we could for them." "I'm glad to hear it," Race commented. He looked over his shoulders at the proximity of so many looters. Very few of them seemed to be checking the corpses anymore. Instead, they were heading across the field straight for him. Race began to feel a little bit unnerved. He stroked the wooden haft of his newly acquired bow and considered preparing it for combat. "Yes," the elf agreed, clearly trying to keep Race's attention on him. "Indeed, this has proven to be a most profitable day for us. Maybe you should come back with us to our camp and I'll show you." "Thank you," Race replied. "Maybe later. I'm looking for someone at the moment. I think they might still be in the nearby forest somewhere." A sudden movement behind him prompted Race to turn and face what he perceived to be a possible threat. The looters behind him were getting dangerously close. Race pulled one of his arrows from the quiver and knocked it to his bow. "There's no need for that," the first elf said. Race turned on his halices to face the first elf, his arrow ready. "Tell your friends to keep their distance. They're making me nervous." Race had absolutely no idea what hit him. All he knew for sure was that the world suddenly shone very bright for a split second, and then went totally black.